She hadn't told anyone about what happened, not even her roommate. It didn't seem like something to brag about. She hadn't done it for attention or reward. It just felt right to help. Still, sometimes she wondered what happened to him afterward. She hoped he was okay, that he had found peace after losing his wife and nearly being scammed. One night, about 2 weeks later, the bar was unusually quiet. The regulars had already left and only a few people sat scattered around, chatting softly. The rain outside tapped gently against the windows. Lena was restocking bottles when she heard the door creak open. She turned and saw a tall man in a gray coat standing in the doorway, shaking off the rain. For a second, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Then he took off his hat and she realized it was him. The old man. She smiled instantly. "Well, look who's back," she said warmly. "I was wondering if I'd ever see you again." He laughed softly as he walked toward the counter. "You probably thought I'd vanished for good." "Not vanished," she replied, "just busy enjoying your tea somewhere else." He chuckled again and sat on one of the stools. "You remember my order?" "Of course," she said. "1 cup of tea, extra hot." While she prepared it, he looked around the bar. "You keep this place running nicely," he said. "It feels comforting here." "Thank you," she said with a smile. "It's not much, but I try to make it feel like home for people." He nodded slowly. "I can see that. You've got a gift for it." When she placed the tea in front of him, he looked at her carefully, his eyes soft and thoughtful. "I never really got to thank you properly," he said. "That night, I don't even like thinking about what could have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Lena shook her head lightly. "It's okay. You don't need to thank me. I was just doing what anyone should do." He smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised how few people actually would." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside had grown heavier and the sound of it filled the quiet bar. Then he said, "May I ask you something personal?" "Sure," Lena replied. "Why are you working here?" The question caught her off guard. She laughed softly. "That's a long story." "I have time," he said gently. Lena thought for a moment, then leaned against the counter. "Well, I've been here since I finished school. I didn't have enough money to go to college, so I started working. First at a cafe, then here. I've always liked places like this. You meet all kinds of people, hear all kinds of stories. But my real dream is to open my own little coffee shop someday. A place with plants, soft music, maybe a bookshelf in the corner." He smiled. "That sounds wonderful. What's stopping you?" She sighed quietly. "Money, mostly. I've been saving, but every time I think I'm close, something comes up. Rent, bills, family stuff. You know how it goes," he nodded knowingly. "I do. Life always seems to test people with good hearts the hardest." She laughed softly. "Maybe, but I'm not giving up. It'll happen one day." He looked at her with admiration. "I believe you. You remind me of myself when I was young. I used to dream big, too. I started out washing dishes in a small diner, working 16 hours a day. Everyone told me I'd never make it far, but I kept at it." "Really?" she asked, surprised. "Oh yes," he said, smiling as he sipped his tea. "I eventually opened my own restaurant. It wasn't fancy at first, just a few tables, a small kitchen, and a lot of hard work. But people liked it. They liked that it felt real, like a place made with love. Over time, it grew. I ended up owning a few more." Lena's eyes widened. "You owned restaurants?" He nodded. "For almost 30 years. I retired only a few years ago. My wife and I used to travel after that. We had plans to see the world. But life had other ideas." Lena's smile softened. "I'm sorry about your wife." He looked down for a moment, then smiled faintly. "She was the best thing that ever happened to me. Losing her, well, it left me lost for a while. That's why I was so easily fooled by that scam. I wasn't thinking straight. I just wanted to believe someone cared." Lena's eyes softened. "I understand that. Grief can make us trust the wrong people sometimes." He looked up at her and nodded slowly. "You're wise for your age." She smiled modestly. "I've seen enough stories walk through that door to learn a few things." He chuckled, then reached into his coat pocket and took out a small envelope. "I didn't come here just for tea," he said. Lena frowned slightly. "What's that?" "Nothing bad," he assured her. "Just a small thank you." She shook her head. "No, please, you don't have to." He raised his hand gently. "I insist. It's not much, but it's something I wanted to do." Reluctantly, she took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a simple handwritten note that read, "For your kindness, your courage, and your dreams, don't give up. Along with it was a gift card to a small coffee equipment store nearby. Her heart warmed instantly. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I wanted to," he replied. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost, trust. That's worth more than money. So consider it my way of saying thank you." Lena smiled genuinely. "That's very kind of you." "Thank you so much." He waved his hand dismissively. "It's nothing, but promise me something. When you open that coffee shop one day, you'll send me an invitation." She laughed. "You'll be the first to know." He smiled warmly. "Good. Then I'll hold you to that." They talked for another hour, sharing stories about their lives, favorite foods, the cities they'd visited, and the strange people they'd met along the way. It didn't feel like a conversation between a young woman and an old man. It felt like two souls from different generations finding comfort in each other's company. When it was time for him to leave, the rain had stopped. He stood up slowly, put on his coat, and said, "Thank you for the tea, Lena, and for reminding me that the world still has good people in it." "Take care of yourself," she said warmly. "Don't disappear for too long next time," he smiled. "No promises." As he walked out, Lena watched him through the window, his silhouette fading under the soft streetlight. Something about him stayed with her long after he left. Maybe it was the quiet strength in his voice or the kindness in his eyes. Whatever it was, she felt a strange connection to him, as if their meeting wasn't just by chance. The following weeks moved along quietly again, but small things started to change for Lena. She found herself more hopeful, more driven. The old man's words about perseverance echoed in her mind. Sometimes when she felt tired after a long shift, she'd think of his story, how he started with nothing and built something beautiful. It gave her courage to keep saving, even if it was just a few dollars at a time. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A sleek black car pulled up outside the bar. It stood out against the row of old buildings like something from a different world. A driver stepped out, looked around, and then walked inside. He was well-dressed and polite. "Excuse me," he said, approaching the counter. "Are you Lena?" She nodded, a little confused. "Yes, I am." He handed her a white envelope sealed neatly. "This is for you, from Mr. Dalton." Her heart skipped a beat. "He sent this?" "Yes," the driver said with a small smile. "He asked me to make sure you got it personally." Before she could ask anything more, he tipped his hat and left. Lena stood there, holding the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. She opened it slowly, and inside was a letter written in careful handwriting. "Dear Lena, you once told me that your dream was to open a little coffee shop filled with warmth and kindness. I've been thinking about that ever since we met. People like you are rare, and I want to help your dream come true. Enclosed, you'll find something that might make it easier." Inside was a folded document and a small check. The amount was enough to change her life. Her eyes filled with tears. She couldn't believe it. It didn't feel real. She read the letter again, her heart pounding. "You helped me when I had nothing to give. You expected nothing in return. That kind of goodness deserves to be seen and shared. This is my way of thanking you for reminding me what truly matters in life." Lena sat down behind the counter, unable to stop smiling through her tears. She felt a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. The feeling of being seen, of being valued not for what she had, but for who she was. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stayed awake thinking about how a single act of kindness had led to something so unexpected. She didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where her dreams would finally start to take shape, and where the man she once helped would become a part of her story in ways she never imagined. Lena couldn't stop thinking about the letter. She read it over and over again, afraid she might be dreaming. Every line felt unreal. The gentle handwriting, the kindness behind the words, the generosity that didn't make sense to her. The check sat on the table, almost glowing under the yellow light of her small kitchen. It wasn't just money. It was a door she had only ever imagined opening. Her roommate peeked over her shoulder and gasped when she saw it. "Lena, is this real?" "I think so," she whispered. "It's from the man I told you about, the one from the bar." The night was calm, and the soft hum of music filled the air inside the small bar at the corner of the street. The place wasn't fancy, but it had a warmth that drew people in. The wooden counters were a little worn, the lighting soft and golden, and laughter often drifted between the tables. Behind the counter stood a young woman named Lena, wiping glasses and greeting each person with a smile that came naturally, even when she was tired. Lena had been working there for almost 3 years. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid her bills at least most of the time. She lived in a small apartment nearby, shared with a friend who worked night shifts at a hospital. Every evening she tied her hair back, slipped into her black apron, and tried to make every customer feel welcome. She had a gentle way of talking that made people open up. Some came just for a drink, others came because they liked being listened to. It was around 9 when the door opened and a cold breeze slipped in with an elderly man. He was dressed neatly, a gray coat, polished shoes, a small hat, but he looked unsure of himself, like he wasn't used to being in places like this. Lena noticed him right away. He stood near the entrance for a few seconds, scanning the room before slowly walking to the bar counter. "Good evening," she said warmly. "What can I get you?" The man smiled faintly, his eyes kind but tired. "Just a cup of tea if you have any." Lena nodded. "Coming right up." While the water boiled, she couldn't help but notice him checking his phone repeatedly, then glancing at the door. He looked worried. She placed the cup in front of him and asked gently, "Are you waiting for someone?" He hesitated before replying, "Yes, I am. A gentleman is supposed to meet me here tonight. He said he could help me with some business matter." She smiled politely, though inside she was curious. "Business matter, huh? Sounds important," he chuckled softly. "It is, I suppose. He said he could help me unlock an inheritance that my late wife left behind. He called me a few days ago and said everything was ready. I just need to sign a few papers and pay a small processing fee. Then everything will be transferred." Lena paused for a moment. Something about the story made her uneasy. She had heard too many similar tales, especially from older customers who'd been tricked by people pretending to help. But she didn't want to sound rude or alarm him right away, so she smiled and said, "That's nice. I hope it all goes smoothly." The man nodded, sipping his tea. He should be here any minute. As minutes passed, the bar started to fill up. A few regulars came in, and the low hum of conversation grew louder. But Lena kept glancing at the old man. He checked his phone again, sighed, and muttered something about traffic. Then, about 20 minutes later, the door opened again and a tall man in a dark suit walked in. He looked much younger, probably in his 30s. His expression was confident. Too confident, Lena thought. He spotted the old man right away and walked over briskly. "Mr. Dalton." "Sorry to keep you waiting, sir," he said with a practiced smile. The old man looked relieved. "Ah, there you are. I was starting to think something went wrong." "Not at all," the man replied, sitting down beside him. "Everything's ready. I just need your signature and the small transaction fee so we can unlock the funds. You'll have your inheritance in less than 24 hours. Lena froze for a moment, her instincts kicking in. She wasn't sure why, but something about the man's tone, the way he spoke, and the speed of his words felt wrong. She had seen people like that before, the ones who talk fast and act confident so you don't question them. She moved a little closer, pretending to wipe the counter near their table. The younger man pulled out a few papers and placed them in front of the old man. "Just a few signatures here and here. Oh, and we'll need to make the initial payment. $2,000 in cash or transfer, whichever's easier for you." The old man hesitated. "$2,000? I thought you said it was just a small processing fee." "Yes, sir," the man replied quickly. "It's just temporary. It'll be refunded once the transfer is complete. You're about to receive over $100,000, so this is just routine paperwork." Lena's stomach tightened. She'd heard this exact line before from someone who had scammed her neighbor's uncle last year. She couldn't stand by and watch it happen again. She walked over with a smile and interrupted softly. "Sorry to bother you, sir. Could I get your signature for the tab? I just need to close it before my shift ends." The old man looked confused, but he nodded and took the pen. Lena leaned slightly closer and whispered under her breath, "Don't give him anything. I think he's scamming you." The man looked up at her, startled, but she kept smiling like everything was normal. The younger man's expression tightened. "Excuse me," he said sharply. "We're in the middle of a private meeting." "Oh, sorry," Lena said cheerfully. "Just doing my job." She turned and walked to the back of the bar where the phone was. Her hands shook slightly as she dialed the police station nearby. She explained quickly what was happening, giving the address and a short description. They told her to keep the man there until an officer arrived. Meanwhile, the tension at the table grew. The younger man leaned closer to the old man, his voice lower now. Sir, we don't have much time. These things move fast. If you delay, the bank might freeze the funds again. The old man looked anxious. I don't want that. My wife's money. Exactly, the younger man said, trying to hand him a pen again. But before he could push any further, Lena walked back over and placed a fresh glass of water in front of them. On the house, she said with a friendly tone, though her eyes briefly met the old man's. She gave a small shake of her head, just enough for him to notice. The younger man shot her a suspicious look. I said we don't need anything, he snapped. All right, Lena replied casually, just being nice. Minutes later, the sound of footsteps echoed from outside. 2 uniformed officers entered the bar. The younger man froze instantly. One officer approached him. Sir, we received a report of fraudulent activity. May we speak to you for a moment? The man's face drained of color. This is a mistake, he said quickly. I'm just helping this gentleman with paperwork. The officers asked for identification, which he couldn't provide. Within moments, it became clear who he really was. A known scammer who had been targeting elderly people in the area. They escorted him out while the old man sat in stunned silence. Lena walked over, her heart still pounding. Are you all right, sir? She asked softly. He looked up at her, his eyes wide. I can't believe it. I was about to hand him everything. You didn't, she said kindly. That's what matters. He exhaled shakily and smiled faintly. You saved me from making a very big mistake. Thank you, young lady. I don't even know your name. It's Lena, she said, and you don't need to thank me. I just didn't want to see you get hurt. The officers came back in briefly to take statements. After they left, the old man stayed for a while, sipping what was left of his tea. He seemed calmer now, but there was a sadness in his eyes. My wife passed away last year, he said quietly. We were married 50 years. Since then, I've been alone. I thought maybe someone out there was trying to help me for once. Lena's chest tightened. I'm really sorry for your loss, she said gently. But there are still good people in the world. You just have to be careful who you trust. He nodded. I see that now. You've got a good heart, Lena. People like you make the world a little better. She smiled modestly. I just try to do the right thing. He reached for his wallet. Please let me at least give you something for your kindness. She quickly shook her head. No, sir, that's not necessary. I'm just glad you're okay. He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled softly. You remind me of my granddaughter. Always stubborn when someone tries to thank her. They both laughed quietly. When he finally stood to leave, he put on his coat and said, I hope good things come your way, Lena. You deserve that. Take care of yourself, she replied. As he walked out the door, Lena watched him disappear into the night. Something about the encounter stayed with her, not just because she had helped someone, but because she could tell he was lonely, like he had been waiting for more than just money. She cleaned up the bar after closing, her mind still replaying the evening. The world outside was quiet again, and the streetlights glowed softly through the windows. She locked up, stepped out into the cool night air, and started walking home. Her shoes clicked against the pavement as she thought about how easily things could have gone differently if she hadn't paid attention. For a moment she felt proud, not in a boastful way, but in that quiet kind of pride that comes from knowing you did something right when it mattered most. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she smiled to herself. She didn't know it yet, but the man she had helped wasn't just any ordinary stranger. Their paths would cross again soon, in a way that would change her life forever. The next few days passed quietly for Lena. Life went back to its usual rhythm, pouring drinks, wiping tables, listening to the laughter and small talk that filled the bar every night. But sometimes, when things got slow, her mind would drift back to that evening with the old man. She still remembered the look on his face when he realized how close he had come to losing everything, the shock, the relief, and then the gratitude in his eyes. It wasn't something she could easily forget. Her roommate stared at her in disbelief. You mean the old man you helped that night? The one who almost got scammed? Yes, Lena said softly. He came back a few times after that. We talked. He's kind, gentle, but I never expected something like this. What are you going to do? Her roommate asked. Lena stared at the check again, her hands trembling slightly. I don't know yet. But maybe it's time I start what I've always dreamed of. That night she didn't sleep much. Her heart was racing with both excitement and fear. What if it was too good to be true? What if it was a mistake? But deep down, something told her it wasn't. The old man had been honest from the start. His words had always come from a place of sincerity. The next morning, Lena decided to go to the bank. The woman behind the counter checked the details and nodded. "It's completely valid," she said. "You can deposit it today." Lena felt her knees go weak. It was real. Everything was real. As she walked out of the bank, the morning sun felt different, brighter somehow. She took a deep breath, smiling at the thought that maybe her life was finally changing. That afternoon, she called in a favor from a friend who worked in real estate. They spent days visiting small shops and empty spaces for rent. Most were too expensive, but Lena didn't give up. She walked through each one, picturing tables, chairs, coffee cups, and smiling faces. After a week of searching, she found a small corner shop at the edge of town. It wasn't perfect. The walls were old, the floor creaked, and the windows needed cleaning. But when she stood inside, she could almost see her dream come alive. "This is the one," she said quietly. Her friend laughed. "It doesn't look like much now." "I know," Lena said, smiling. "But it will." She signed the papers a few days later. The shop was officially hers. The moment she held the keys, tears filled her eyes. She couldn't help but whisper, "Thank you, Mr. Dalton." The next few weeks were a blur of hard work. Lena spent her mornings cleaning, painting, and setting up furniture. Friends stopped by to help, and even some regulars from the bar dropped in to lend a hand. She bought second-hand tables, hung soft lights, and filled the space with plants and the scent of fresh coffee beans. She wanted it to feel warm, not fancy, not polished, just real. A place where anyone could walk in and feel like they belonged. Late at night, after everyone went home, Lena would sit by the window sipping tea, imagining what it would be like when the doors finally opened. One evening, as she was arranging the last few decorations, she noticed something on the counter, a small brown envelope with her name written on it. She froze. She hadn't seen anyone come in. The door had been locked most of the day. She slowly opened the envelope, and inside was a note written in the same familiar handwriting. "I stopped by to see how you were doing. You weren't here, but I can see the place already feels alive. You're doing beautifully. Keep going, and when it's ready, I'll be there." There was no signature, but she didn't need one. She knew exactly who it was from. She smiled to herself, whispering, "You really don't miss a thing, do you?" Finally, after months of preparation, the day came. The sign outside read, "Dalton's Place." It wasn't a big sign, just simple wooden letters painted by hand. She had chosen the name as a quiet tribute, a thank you to the man who made it all possible. On opening morning, she arrived before sunrise. The world outside was still half asleep. The smell of coffee filled the air as she brewed the first pot. Her hands shook with nerves as she arranged the pastries on the counter. By 8 o'clock, the first customers started coming in. Curious neighbors, friends, a few of her old bar regulars. They looked around, smiling at the cozy atmosphere. Some said it reminded them of home. Others said it was exactly the kind of place the town needed. Lena tried to hide her emotions, but her heart was full. Every smile, every sip of coffee, every thank you felt like a little miracle. Around midday, the door opened again, and she looked up instinctively. There he was. Mr. Dalton walked in slowly, wearing the same gentle smile she remembered. He looked healthier than before, his eyes bright, his posture strong. When he saw her behind the counter, his face lit up. "Well," he said warmly, "you did it." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "You came?" "Of course I did," he said, looking around proudly. "You didn't just open a coffee shop. You created a piece of peace," she laughed softly. "A piece of peace? I like that," he chuckled. "It suits this place. It feels alive." She poured him a cup of tea, extra hot just the way he liked it, and placed it on the counter. "For you," she said. "No charge," he smiled. "I'll accept it only because it's from you." They sat together for a while as customers came and went. People greeted her, complimented the place, and thanked her for bringing something new to the neighborhood. Mr. Dalton watched quietly, his eyes glimmering with pride. "You see what you've done? You've built something that makes people happy." Lena nodded. "It still feels unreal sometimes, like I'm living someone else's dream." He smiled softly. "No, my dear. You're living your own. You just needed a little push." She looked at him gratefully. I still don't know how to thank you for everything. You already have, he said, by not wasting the chance. That's thanks enough. The two of them sat there talking for hours. He told her stories about his late wife, how they used to dream of opening a small tea house by the sea. She told him about her struggles, the nights she almost gave up, and how his faith in her had changed everything. At one point, a little girl came running to the counter holding a cookie. Miss Lena, this is the best cookie ever, she said with a bright smile. Lena laughed. I'll tell the baker you said that. Mr. Dalton watched her with a tender expression. You were born for this, he said quietly. To make people feel welcome. She blushed slightly. I just like seeing people happy. That's what makes you special, he replied. Before he left, he handed her another envelope. Don't worry, he said when she frowned. It's not money this time. She opened it later after he'd gone. Inside was a photograph of a seaside cafe, small, cozy, with blue chairs and flower boxes under the windows. On the back of the photo he had written, This was our dream once. I think my wife would have loved what you've created. Keep her spirit alive. Lena held the photo close, tears rolling down her cheeks. She placed it in a frame on the counter beside the register. Every time she looked at it, she felt his kindness and the love that had inspired her journey. Weeks turned into months, and Dalton's place became a beloved spot in town. People came not just for the coffee, but for the feeling, the sense of calm and comfort that lingered in the air. Lena worked tirelessly, always greeting people with a smile, always remembering that it all started with one act of kindness on an ordinary night. Every so often, Mr. Dalton would visit. Sometimes he'd bring flowers, sometimes a newspaper, sometimes just stories from his past. They became like family, two people who met by chance but ended up changing each other's lives in the best way possible. One afternoon, as she watched him chatting with a group of customers, Lena thought about how strange life was, how a single moment could rewrite the future. She smiled to herself, whispering softly, You never really know what a small act can do. And as the sunlight streamed through the windows, filling the little cafe with warmth, she realized something beautiful, that kindness doesn't just save others. Sometimes it saves you too. Days passed quietly after the night when Lena helped the old man. The bar returned to its usual rhythm, music in the background, clinking glasses, laughter mixing with the faint smell of citrus and spilled beer. But even as life went on, there were moments when Lena found herself thinking about the man she had helped. There was something about him, gentle, soft-spoken, yet lonely. She often wondered how he was doing, but she never expected to see him again. Her days had grown heavier lately. Bills kept piling up, her rent was late, and her second job at the diner wasn't bringing in much. Every time she looked at her worn-out shoes or her old phone that barely held a charge, she reminded herself that it was just temporary. She was saving every penny to one day open her own cafe, a small place with warm lights, homemade pastries, and music playing softly in the background. That dream was what kept her going, even when everything else felt hard. One cloudy afternoon, the bar was almost empty. It was one of those slow days when time moved lazily. Lena was cleaning the counter when she heard the sound of a car door closing outside. She looked up and saw a black car parked across the street. A man stepped out, wearing a gray coat and a kind expression that she recognized instantly. Her heart skipped a beat. It was the old man. He walked carefully but with more strength than before. His shoulders seemed straighter, his face brighter. Lena quickly wiped her hands and met him at the door, surprised but happy to see him. I can't believe it's you, she said, smiling warmly. He chuckled softly. I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to see you again if you don't mind. Of course not, she replied, motioning him toward a booth near the window. Please sit. Can I get you something? Tea? Coffee? Tea would be lovely, he said. Black, no sugar. As she prepared his drink, Lena couldn't help but feel curious. Why had he come back? He looked healthier, more confident, as if something in his life had changed for the better. When she brought the tea to his table, he looked at her with the same gentle eyes she remembered. But there was something else now, an unspoken purpose. I've been meaning to visit for weeks, he said, stirring his tea even though there was no sugar in it. I wanted to thank you again properly this time. What you did for me that night, it changed a lot more than you think. Lena smiled modestly. I'm just glad you're okay. That whole thing was scary. He nodded. It was, and embarrassing, to be honest. I still can't believe I almost fell for that man's lies. I should have known better. Anyone could have been fooled, she said softly. They target good people, people who trust easily. He gave a quiet laugh. You're kind, but still, it shook me. I spent weeks thinking about it, about how a stranger cared enough to step in when others might have looked away. It reminded me of a time when I was younger, when kindness was more common. Lena listened, her chin resting on her hand. There was something peaceful about hearing him talk. He told her how he'd lost his wife 2 years earlier, and how after that life had grown empty. You see, he continued, my wife used to take care of everything. The bills, the calls, the people. When she passed, I didn't just lose her. I lost the rhythm of my life. I became careless, distracted, and lonely. That's how that man found me. I'm sorry, Lena said softly. Losing someone like that. I can't imagine, he smiled sadly. It's all right. I had a good life with her. But when you helped me that night, it was like someone opened a window in a dark room. You reminded me that the world still has good people. Lena felt her cheeks warm. That means a lot, really. But I didn't do anything special. You did, he said firmly. You noticed. You cared. That's rare. There was a pause. Outside, light rain began to fall, tapping gently against the glass. The man looked out the window for a moment, lost in thought, then turned back to her. Can I ask you something personal? Sure, Lena said. What keeps you going? You seem determined. I can see it in your eyes. Like you're working towards something. She laughed quietly. I guess you could say that. I'm saving up to open a cafe. It's been my dream since I was little. I love cooking, baking, making people feel at home. But it's hard. Rent keeps going up and saving anything these days feels impossible. The old man listened intently. A cafe, you say? Yeah, just a small one. I even have a name picked out, she said, smiling shyly. But I'll need a few more years of saving before it can happen. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being unrealistic. He leaned forward. You know, I once started small too. My first restaurant was the size of this bar. I borrowed money, took risks, made plenty of mistakes, but it worked out in the end. She looked surprised. You ran restaurants? Many years ago, he said with a hint of pride. Before I retired, I owned a few across the city. It wasn't easy, but it taught me that hard work only gets you halfway. The rest comes from having someone believe in you when you can't see your own potential. Lena was quiet for a moment. His words touched her deeply. I don't know if I've ever had that, she admitted. Someone believing in me like that. He smiled kindly. Maybe that will change. They talked for another hour. About life, about dreams, about how quickly time passes when you're not paying attention. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt like someone truly listened to her. When the man finally stood to leave, he handed her a small business card. It had his name, a phone number, and nothing else. If you ever need advice about business, he said, or just someone to talk to, call me. I mean it, she accepted the card and thanked him. He smiled, put on his coat, and left, waving at her through the rain-streaked window. As his car disappeared around the corner, Lena stood there for a long time, holding the card like it was something precious. That night, as she walked home under the streetlights, she couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said, about believing in yourself, about how small kindnesses can change everything. She didn't know what to expect, but something told her that their paths weren't done crossing. The next few days were busy. Lena went back to her routine, cleaning tables, serving drinks, counting tips, but now there was a new lightness in her. She felt motivated, hopeful even. Sometimes she'd glance at the card she'd tucked into her wallet, wondering if she should call. Then one morning, as she was heading out for work, she noticed an envelope slipped under her apartment door. It had her name on it written in neat handwriting. There was no return address. Inside was a small note that read, "Thank you for reminding me what kindness looks like. Let's talk again soon." It wasn't signed, but she didn't need a signature to know who it was from. She smiled, folded the note carefully, and placed it beside the card. A few days later, the black car appeared again outside the bar. Lena's heart raced as she saw the familiar figure walk in. This time he wasn't carrying sadness in his eyes. He looked alive, excited. He greeted her with the warmth of an old friend. "I told you I'd be back," he said with a grin. "I'm starting to believe you like my tea more than the company," she joked. He laughed softly. "Actually, I came to talk about something else. Something that might change both our lives. Lena blinked, unsure what he meant. But as he began to explain, she could feel that something extraordinary was about to happen. Something she hadn't dared to dream of before. That moment, the world around them seemed to slow. The noise of the bar faded. All she could hear was his voice, calm and certain, as he told her he had an idea, one that involved her dream, her cafe, and a chance she never thought she'd get. Her eyes widened in disbelief, her heart pounding. The man smiled knowingly, as if he'd been waiting for the right time to say it. And just like that, the story that had begun with a single act of kindness was about to take a turn. Neither of them could have ever imagined. The day had started like any other. Lena arrived at the bar a little early, wiping down tables and checking the supplies before the evening crowd arrived. But something about that day felt different. She couldn't explain it, just a quiet feeling that something important was about to happen. When she looked up, she saw the familiar black car pulling up again. Her heart gave a small jump. The old man stepped out, carrying a brown leather folder under his arm. He waved when he saw her through the window, and she hurried to meet him at the door. "You're becoming a regular here," she teased lightly. He smiled, his eyes crinkling. "I hope you don't mind." "Not at all," she said warmly. "You're always welcome." They sat at the same booth near the window. She brought him his usual cup of black tea and sat across from him this time, curious about the folder he carried. He placed it on the table, tapping it gently. "I've been thinking a lot since our last talk," he began. "You told me about your dream, your cafe. I couldn't get it out of my mind." Lena smiled, a little embarrassed. "It's just a dream for now. Something to look forward to." He shook his head. "No, it's more than that. I saw something in your eyes that night, a kind of fire. You reminded me of myself when I was young, when I started my first restaurant. I made plenty of mistakes, but I had people who believed in me. Without them, I'd never have made it." She looked down at her hands. "I don't really have anyone like that. My parents passed years ago, and I've been on my own ever since. But it's okay. I've learned to manage," he smiled kindly. "You've done more than manage. You've survived, and you've done it with kindness. That's rare." There was a pause before he slowly opened the folder. Inside were papers neatly arranged along with a small white envelope. He slid both across the table to her. "I want to help you," he said simply. "I've invested in small businesses before, but none have felt as right as this. I believe in people, not numbers, and I believe in you." Lena frowned slightly, not sure she understood. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said with a calm smile, "that I'd like to fund your cafe. Not as charity, but as a partnership. You run it your way and I'll guide you with the business side. I've already found a small space available downtown. It needs work, but it's perfect for a cozy cafe. I took the liberty of holding it for you." She blinked, completely speechless. "You, what? You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," he said, chuckling softly. "This isn't a handout. It's an investment in someone who deserves a chance. I can see your heart is in it." Lena sat there frozen, her mind spinning. She had dreamed of this for so long. Late nights, imagining her cafe's name written above a little shop window, the smell of fresh bread, the sound of laughter. But it had always seemed unreachable. Now this kind man, someone she had met by chance, was offering to make it real. "I can't accept this," she whispered finally. "It's too much." He leaned forward, his voice gentle. "You accepted far less from life than you've given. You saved me, Lena. If it weren't for you, I might have lost everything that night. You gave me back something I thought was gone, faith in people. This is how I want to thank you." Her eyes filled with tears. "But why me?" He smiled softly. "Because when you helped me, you didn't expect anything in return. You saw someone in trouble and acted from the heart. That's the kind of person I want to see succeed. You have no idea how rare that is." Lena covered her mouth, overwhelmed. For a long time, she couldn't speak. The man just sat there quietly, sipping his tea as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When she finally found her voice, she said softly, "If I do this, if I accept, I promise I won't let you down." He nodded. "I know you won't." Over the next few weeks, everything began to change. Lena met with him several times to look over the space he had mentioned. It was a small shop on a quiet street corner, with big windows and an old wooden door that creaked when it opened. It needed new paint, new lights, and a lot of cleaning, but Lena saw what it could become. The old man handled the business side, paperwork, contracts and permits while she focused on the creative parts. The menu, the decorations, the colors. Every time she walked into the empty shop, she could already imagine the smell of coffee and pastries filling the air. Sometimes she still couldn't believe it was real. She'd stand in the middle of the room with paint on her hands and think, this can't be happening to me. But it was. The old man visited often, bringing sandwiches and coffee as they worked. He never treated her like an employee or someone beneath him. He listened to her ideas, respected her choices, and encouraged her when she doubted herself. One afternoon, while they were setting up the tables, he said, "You know, I haven't felt this alive in years. Working on this place, it gives me purpose again." She smiled. "Then I guess we're helping each other," he chuckled. Seems so. Months later, the cafe was finally ready. The sign above the door read Dalton's Place, his idea, though she had argued against it at first. "It should be your name," she had said. He shook his head with a laugh. "It's not about me anymore. It's about what you've built. Besides, the name will remind people that good things come from good hearts." On opening day, the cafe was full of life. Friends, neighbors, and even some of the bar's regulars came to support her. The smell of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. The walls were decorated with photos of local artists and warm string lights that made the room glow. The old man sat by the window, watching proudly as customers lined up for her fresh pastries and hot drinks. Every now and then he caught her eye, and she'd smile at him, both of them knowing how far they'd come. Later that day, as things slowed down, Lena brought him a cup of his favorite tea. "I still can't believe this is real," she said, sitting across from him. He smiled. "You made it real," she shook her head. "You gave me the chance. Without you, this wouldn't exist." He looked around the cafe, the laughter, the warmth. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But without you, I'd still be sitting alone, afraid to trust anyone again. You gave me back hope, Lena. This place, it's as much yours as it is mine." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were happy ones. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," he said gently. "Just promise me something, anything. Never lose that kindness. It's what makes this world bearable." She nodded, unable to speak. As months passed, the cafe became a local favorite. People loved the warm atmosphere, the homemade desserts, and the kindness that seemed to linger in every corner. Lena treated every customer like a friend, remembering names, listening to stories, offering a smile when someone looked down. One morning, a young man came in and said, "I've heard this place was built on kindness." Lena smiled softly. "That's true. It all started with one night and one good deed." He looked curious, but she didn't say more. She didn't need to. The framed photo of the old man by the counter said everything. It was a picture of him smiling, holding a cup of tea, with the words written underneath. "Kindness always finds its way back." Whenever Lena looked at that photo, she remembered the night she first met him, the confusion in his eyes, the fear in his voice, and how a small act of courage had led to a friendship that changed both their lives. Sometimes, she still half expected him to walk through the door, carrying his folder and that calm smile, and in a way he never really left. His spirit was in the cafe, in every warm conversation, every cup of coffee served with care. Lena had finally built the life she'd dreamed of, not through luck, but through kindness, courage, and a single choice to do the right thing when it mattered. And every evening, when she turned the sign from open to closed, she'd whisper softly to herself, "Thank you," because she knew the truth now. When you help someone from the heart, you don't just change their life, you change your own.